Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're going to be exploring something we all do every single day, learning, but we're not just talking about what you learn. It's about how to learn better, more effectively, using the incredible power of our own brains.
Yeah, I think a lot of people, they have this idea that they're just not good at learning certain things, but that's simply not true. Your brain is built to learn, and the more you understand about how that process works, the better you can become at it.
Exactly. And to help us on this journey, we have two fascinating sources. We have excerpts from the original manuscript of The Brain Likes to Learn This Way, a book written by a neurosurgeon, someone who knows the brain like the back of their hand. And we also have a polished audio transcript, maybe from a book club or a learning platform that dives into the same material.
Yeah, it's always helpful to have multiple perspectives, right? It's like getting a 360-degree view of the topic.
Absolutely. And in this case, both of our sources agree on some pretty groundbreaking ideas.
Yeah.
They completely debunk the myth that intelligence is fixed, that we're somehow stuck with a certain level of learning ability. Instead, they emphasize the incredible plasticity of the brain, how it's constantly changing and adapting based on what we expose it to.
Yeah, it's actually a really empowering concept when you think about it. You're not limited by some predetermined capacity for learning. You can actively shape and improve your brain's ability to learn throughout your entire life.
I love that. So where do we even begin? I mean, the brain's a pretty complex organ.
Well, let's start with the fundamental building blocks of learning: neurons and synapses. These are the tiny messengers and connections that allow different parts of your brain to communicate with each other.
Okay. I vaguely remember learning about this in high school biology class, but refresh my memory. How do they actually work in relation to learning?
Think of it like a vast network of roads and cities. The cities are like different areas of your brain, each specialized for certain functions, and the roads connecting them are the synapses. Every time you learn something new, you're essentially building a new road between two cities.
So the more roads you build, the more interconnected your brain becomes, and the more efficiently information can travel.
Precisely. And the more you use a particular road, meaning the more you practice or revisit a certain piece of information, the wider and more established that road becomes, making it even easier for information to flow.
That makes sense, but it's not just about passively absorbing information, right? Our sources both emphasize that active engagement is crucial for building strong, lasting neural connections.
Absolutely. It's like the difference between glancing at a map and actually walking the terrain yourself. When you actively engage with information, whether it's through problem-solving discussion or teaching it to someone else, you force your brain to make those connections stronger and more meaningful.
Both sources actually point to three specific types of stimulation that are especially powerful for brain development: nature, social interaction, and active learning.
What's fascinating is that these three areas have been traditionally seen as separate from learning, almost like breaks or rewards after the real work of studying or attending a lecture. But in reality, they're actively stimulating your brain and enhancing its ability to learn.
So taking a walk in the park after a study session isn't just a nice way to relax, it's actually priming your brain to learn more effectively.
Exactly. Studies have shown that exposure to nature can boost cognitive function, reduce stress, and even increase creativity.
And what about social interaction? How does that contribute to learning?
Well, think about how much you learn through conversations, debates, and simply observing other people when you interact with others. You're exposed to new perspectives. You have to articulate your own thoughts and ideas, and you're constantly challenged to think critically and adapt to new situations.
And that's why those after-school clubs and team projects are so valuable, right? They're not just about having fun. They're building crucial social and cognitive skills through real-world interaction.
Exactly. It's about engaging with the world and with other people in a way that forces your brain to constantly adapt and learn.
Okay, so we've established that the brain is incredibly adaptable and that active engagement is key. But how do we actually harness that power and become more effective learners?
Well, here's where things get really interesting. The manuscript lays out a 5-step formula for effective learning, a sort of roadmap for optimizing how we approach the process.
Right, I'm intrigued. What's step one?
Step 1 is all about setting goals. And I know what you're thinking. Ooh, goals sound so boring and corporate.
Yeah, kinda.
But hear me out. Both sources emphasize that having clear, well-defined goals is crucial for engaging your brain's reward system.
Okay, now we're talking to explain the reward system and how it relates to learning.
So when you set a goal and start working towards it, your brain releases dopamine, which is a neurotransmitter associated with pleasure and motivation. The more progress you make, the more dopamine gets released, creating a positive feedback loop that keeps you engaged and wanting to learn more.
So it's like our brains are wired to enjoy achieving goals, and we can use that to our advantage when it comes to learning.
Precisely. And it's not just about the end goal. It's about breaking down large goals into smaller, more manageable steps, each of which triggers that dopamine release and keeps you motivated along the way.
The book actually shares an anecdote about an Olympic decathlon champion who kept a note in his pocket for 10 years with his ultimate goal written on it. He looked at it every single day, reminding himself of what he was working towards. That kind of focus and dedication is amazing.
It's a powerful example of how clear goals can fuel long-term motivation and drive us to achieve incredible things. But how do we translate that into our everyday learning? I mean, I'm not training for the Olympics.
Well, our sources offer some really practical tips for setting effective learning goals no matter what you're trying to learn. First, make sure your goals are something you genuinely want to achieve.
Right. It has to be something you're intrinsically motivated by, not just something you feel pressure to do. The brain can tell the difference, and it won't engage as fully if the goal feels meaningless or imposed.
The second tip is to make sure your goal feels achievable. If it's too daunting or overwhelming, you're more likely to get discouraged and give up.
It's about finding that sweet spot between challenge and confidence. You want a goal that stretches you but also feels attainable. And remember, breaking down big goals into smaller steps can make the entire process feel much more manageable.
Both sources also highlight the power of rewards. It could be as simple as taking a break after completing a chapter or treating yourself to something enjoyable after reaching a milestone.
Absolutely. And don't underestimate the power of simply acknowledging your progress and celebrating your achievements along the way. It reinforces that positive feedback loop and keeps you motivated.
And finally, both sources emphasize that consistency is key. It's not about cramming for a test or trying to learn everything at once. It's about establishing a regular learning routine and sticking to it over time.
Think of it like building a muscle. You wouldn't expect to see results from a single workout. It's the consistent effort over time that leads to real, lasting change.
So we've set our goals, we're feeling motivated, and we're committed to showing up consistently. What's the next hurdle we need to overcome to become more effective learners?
Ah, yes, the age-old enemy of productivity, distraction.
Distraction. It's everywhere these days. Our phones are buzzing, notifications are popping up, and it feels like our brains are constantly being pulled in a million different directions. How are we supposed to focus when there's so much competing for our attention?
Yeah, it's definitely a challenge, and it's something that both of our sources address head on. They delve into the neurochemistry of focus, explaining how different neurotransmitters in our brains play a role in our ability to concentrate.
Neurotransmitters like dopamine and serotonin. I've heard those terms before, but I'm a bit fuzzy on how they actually affect our focus.
Well, think of them as chemical messengers that help regulate different brain functions. Dopamine, as we discussed earlier, is linked to reward and motivation when we experience something pleasurable or achieve a goal. Our brains release dopamine, and that reinforces the behavior that led to that reward.
So if we can find ways to make learning itself feel rewarding, we can actually boost our dopamine levels and enhance our focus.
Exactly. It's about tapping into that natural reward system and using it to our advantage. One of the sources suggests incorporating elements of gamification into our learning. This could involve using progress trackers, earning points for completing tasks, or even setting up friendly competitions with others.
I love that idea. It's like turning learning into a game, which makes it much more fun and engaging. And what about serotonin? How does that fit into the picture?
Yeah. Serotonin is often referred to as the happy hormone because it plays a role in regulating mood, reducing anxiety, and promoting a sense of well-being. And as you can imagine, feeling calm and content is crucial for sustained focus.
So if we're feeling stressed or anxious, our serotonin levels might be low, and that can make it harder to concentrate.
Exactly. That's why both sources emphasize the importance of self-care practices that support serotonin production.
Like getting enough sleep, exercise, and spending time in nature. We talked about those earlier.
Yes, those activities all have a positive impact on serotonin levels, and one of the sources also mentions the importance of diet. Certain foods, like those rich in tryptophan, an amino acid that's a precursor to serotonin, can actually help boost serotonin production.
So it's not just about willpower or mental discipline. We can actually influence our brain chemistry through lifestyle choices and create a more conducive environment for focus.
Precisely. And there's another neurotransmitter that plays a crucial role in focus, particularly when it comes to short-term bursts of concentration or adrenaline.
Noradrenaline, isn't that the fight or flight chemical, the one that gets us amped up when we're in danger?
That's the one. And while we don't want to be in a constant state of fight or flight, we can actually leverage noradrenaline to boost our focus in short bursts. One of the sources suggests using deadlines and mini penalties as a way to create a sense of urgency and trigger that noradrenaline release.
So instead of just passively saying, I'm going to study for an hour, we could set a timer for 25 minutes and challenge ourselves to complete a specific task within that time frame. And if we don't meet the deadline, we could have a consequence like donating to a cause we don't support or doing an extra chore.
Exactly. It's about introducing a little bit of pressure to keep us on track and engaged. And don't underestimate the power of external accountability. Telling someone else about your goal and deadline can make it feel much more real and motivating.
Okay, so we've got a handle on setting goals and training our focus. What's the next step in becoming a more effective learner?
Well, now that we've laid the foundation, it's time to start building the structure. And that means creating strong internal models.
Internal models. I'm not sure I'm familiar with that term. What exactly are they and why are they so important for learning?
Both sources emphasize that learning isn't just about memorizing isolated facts. It's about creating a network of connected knowledge, a mental framework that allows you to quickly understand and apply information in different contexts.
So it's not just about knowing what, but also about understanding how and why.
Exactly. Think about it this way. Imagine you're trying to build a house. You wouldn't just start randomly piling bricks on top of each other, would
Yeah.
you? You need a blueprint, a plan that shows how all the different pieces fit together to create a solid functional structure.
Okay, I see the analogy. So internal models are like mental blueprints that help us organize and make sense of new information.
Precisely. They're like mental maps that allow you to navigate new terrain, make connections between different concepts, and quickly retrieve information when you need it.
But how do we actually build these internal models? Does it just happen naturally as we learn? Or are there specific strategies we can use?
Both sources offer some really practical advice on this front. One of the key strategies is to engage multiple senses in the learning process.
So instead of just reading a textbook, we could watch videos, listen to podcasts, do hands-on activities, or even explain the concept to someone else.
Exactly. The more senses you involve, the more deeply you process the information, creating stronger and more diverse neural connections. And that leads to more robust internal models.
The neurosurgeon who wrote our book uses a great example. He talks about how a skilled neurosurgeon can instantly recognize different brain structures without having to consciously think about it. It's like their brain has an internal map of the entire human brain built through years of study and experience.
It's a perfect illustration of how internal models work in practice. They become so ingrained that we can access and apply information almost effortlessly. And another strategy that's mentioned in both sources is to make the information meaningful.
Meaningful. How do we do that?
Yeah. Well, it's about connecting new knowledge to what you already know, finding those aha moments where things click into place. You can use mind maps, mnemonics, or even stories to help your brain make sense of the information and integrate it into your existing knowledge base.
Mnemonics. Those are those memory tricks, right? Like using acronyms or rhymes to remember lists or facts.
Exactly. For example, to remember the order of the planets from the sun, you might use the mnemonic, "My very educated mother just served us noodles." Mercury, Venus, Earth, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune.
I've used that one before. It's amazing how those silly little tricks can actually help us remember complex information.
It's all about finding ways to make the information stick. And another technique that's mentioned is interleaved learning.
Interleave learning. That sounds intriguing. What is that?
It involves alternating between different subjects or types of tasks, rather than studying one thing for hours on end. It seems counterintuitive. But research has shown that this approach can actually improve long-term retention and make you a more flexible learner.
So it's like cross-training for your brain.
Exactly. And finally, both sources emphasize the importance of applying knowledge through project-based learning. This could involve building something, solving a real-world problem, or creating something new based on what you've learned.
So instead of just passively reading about coding, you could actually build a website. Or instead of just memorizing historical facts, you could research and write a historical fiction story.
Precisely. It's about taking that knowledge out of the abstract realm and putting it into practice, which solidifies your understanding and helps you identify any gaps in your knowledge.
Okay, so we set goals, trained our focus, and built some solid internal models. What's next on our journey to becoming super learners?
Well, the next step might surprise you. It's seeking positive feedback.
Feedback, isn't that what we get on tests and assignments, and it doesn't always feel very positive.
That's true, but both of our sources challenge us to reframe our perspective on feedback, to see it as a valuable tool for growth rather than a judgment of our worth.
So it's about shifting from a fixed mindset to a growth mindset, embracing challenges, and seeing mistakes as opportunities for learning.
Exactly. And one of the keys to receiving constructive feedback is to seek it out from people who can offer objective insights and helpful suggestions. These could be teachers, mentors, coaches, or even peers who are also learning alongside you.
Having that outside perspective can be invaluable, especially when we're so close to our own work that we might not see our blind spots or areas for improvement. But what if we don't have access to a mentor or someone who can provide that kind of feedback?
One of the audio transcripts suggests developing self-feedback mechanisms. For example, if you're learning a language, you could record yourself speaking and then listen back to identify areas for improvement. Or if you're writing, you could compare your work to professional examples and analyze the differences.
It's about becoming our own coaches, constantly evaluating our progress, and looking for ways to refine our skills. So we've covered 4 crucial steps in this learning journey: setting goals, training focus, building internal models, and seeking positive feedback. What's the final piece of the puzzle?
The final step might be the most surprising to some: resting effectively.
Resting. I thought we were talking about maximizing learning, about pushing ourselves to become super learners. Isn't more study time always better?
Not necessarily. Both sources debunk the myth that learning is a linear process of input equals output. They emphasize that the brain actually consolidates learning during periods of rest.
So it's like our muscles, after a workout, they need time to recover and rebuild.
Exactly. And if we're constantly pushing ourselves without giving our brains a chance to rest and process what we've learned, we're actually hindering our progress.
That makes sense, but what are some specific strategies for resting electively? I mean, we all sleep, right?
Yes. But not all rest is created equal. Both sources recommend incorporating specific practices that have been shown to enhance cognitive function and promote learning.
Okay, I'm all ears. Tell me everything. What can we do to optimize our rest for maximum learning?
Well, one of the most powerful techniques is mindfulness meditation.
Mindfulness meditation, that's interesting. I've heard a lot about the benefits of meditation for stress reduction, but I never really connected it to learning.
It makes sense when you think about how meditation works. It's all about training your attention, calming the chatter of your mind, and becoming more present in the moment. And those skills are incredibly valuable for learning as they help you focus on the task at hand and avoid getting distracted by irrelevant thoughts or external stimuli.
So taking a few minutes each day to simply sit quietly and focus on our breath can actually improve our ability to learn.
Absolutely. Studies have shown that regular meditation can improve focus memory and even cognitive flexibility, the ability to switch between different tasks or perspectives.
Wow, that's pretty impressive. Are there other types of rest that are beneficial for learning?
Of course, both sources emphasize the importance of getting enough high-quality sleep. And I know this might sound obvious, but so many people are chronically sleep deprived, and it's having a huge impact on their cognitive function.
I know I've definitely experienced that brain fog that sets in after a night of tossing and turning. It's hard to think clearly or retain information when you're exhausted.
Exactly, and the manuscript explains why this happens on a neurological level during deep sleep. Our brains are busy consolidating memories, strengthening those neural connections we've built throughout the day. If we're not getting enough sleep, we're essentially robbing our brains of this crucial consolidation time.
So those all-nighters we pulled in college were actually counterproductive.
Mm.
We might have felt like we were cramming information into our brains, but in reality, we were probably hindering our ability to learn it effectively.
Exactly. It's much more beneficial to spread out your study sessions over time and get a good night's sleep between each one. And there's actually a technique that specifically leverages the power of sleep to enhance memory consolidation, the sleep before learning effect.
We touched on this earlier, but can you remind me how it works?
It's pretty simple, really. The idea is to review material right before bed so that the information is still fresh in your mind as you drift off to sleep. This increases the likelihood that your brain will process and store the information during those crucial sleep cycles.
So instead of cramming late into the night, we should end our study sessions with a quick review and then hit the hay.
Precisely. It's a much more brain-friendly way to learn. And there's another technique that can help us optimize our rest and maintain focus throughout the day, the tomato timer technique.
Ah, yes, the tomato timer. I've actually used this one before for work projects. It's super helpful for breaking down large tasks into smaller chunks and avoiding that feeling of overwhelm.
Exactly. And it's equally beneficial for learning. The basic idea is to work in focus bursts of 25 minutes followed by a 5-minute break. You repeat this cycle 4 times and then take a longer break of 15-20 minutes.
It's like building structured rest intervals into our day, which helps prevent mental fatigue and maintain focus over longer periods of time.
Precisely. And those short breaks aren't just for checking your phone or grabbing a snack. They're an opportunity to get up, move around, stretch, or even step outside for a few minutes, all things that can help refresh your brain and prepare you for the next round of focused learning.
Wow, this has been an incredibly eye-opening deep dive. We've gone from the fundamental workings of the brain to actionable strategies for becoming more effective learners, exploring everything from setting goals and training our focus to building internal models, seeking feedback, and even optimizing our rest.
Yeah, it's amazing how much we can achieve when we understand how our brains truly learn. And it's so empowering to realize that we're not stuck with some predetermined capacity for learning. We can actively shape and improve our brains throughout our lives.
Absolutely. And as we wrap up this deep dive, I think it's important to remind ourselves that learning is a journey, not a destination. There's always more to discover, new skills to master, and exciting challenges to embrace.
The key is to approach it with curiosity, enthusiasm, and a willingness to step outside our comfort zones, and to remember that we have this incredible tool, our brain, that's capable of learning and growing in ways we're only just beginning to understand.
So as we leave you today, we have final thought-provoking question to ponder. Now that you know how your brain truly learns, what will you learn differently? What new skills or knowledge will you pursue? And how will you approach the process with this newfound understanding?
Thanks for joining us on this fascinating exploration of the brain's learning power. We hope you've gained some valuable insights and a renewed sense of excitement for your own learning adventures.
Until next time, keep those neural connections firing, fellow knowledge seekers.